Hi everyone. So when we left off on our last part, we were just finishing up the legs, and hopefully you did some refinement to them to make sure they were all in the right location. So I'm going to look at your front view, look at your side views, and make sure that they're set up just the way you want to. And what we're going to do is we're going to continue on this. I'm going to turn off Mesh Smooth for a moment. Excuse me. And we're going to grab the polygons at the very top of our model here. So these four polygons right here. And I'm going to extrude these up maybe about 3 times or so we can start forming along the hip here. Okay, so we're just going to extrude once. We're going to move this into place. I'm going to move this one into place on this side as well. Two. And we'll make sure that we move this into place as well. Do some scaling if you have to as well, of course. And 3. Don't worry, because we're going to do a bit of editing to it right afterwards. Just try and extrude those 3 lines, just so you get the shape down. So I'll just do some slight editing here. Make sure everything kind of fits over here. Gives it a bit of the butt shape. I might bring it up a little bit. Bring this part up. Right here. Try and make sure that you curve this like right down the side of the leg, because what we're going to do when we mesh smooth is we want this line to kind of form down the side. So if I just push this slightly forward, even move all this stuff a little bit forward like that. Then you see it kind of thins out here, and then it expands up to the full hip. Definitely looks good. And I'm going to go to my front view here, hold Alt X. I'll make it slightly transparent. See what it looks like with Mesh Smooth on. I can see that it might be slightly big on the front view, so I'm going to do some scaling to adjust just a little bit. I might even scale everything up here. Like that. That looks pretty good. And I just do some slight tweaking here to the vertexes and do my adjustments. Like so. So what we're going to end up doing afterwards is we're going to start building the actual hips themselves. So that's going to be, what we have to do next. And to do that, I'm actually going to go into here. I'm going to turn off Alt X X-ray, and we're going to start building the actual crotch region here. And to do that, I'm going to pull these polygons out. So these 2 polygons on the side, I'm going to turn off preview. I'm going to grab this front right here. And I'm going to grab, actually just that 1 polygon should be fine for now. We can do our adjustments afterwards to make sure everything kind of lines up like so. We're going to pop out the front part of the stomach here, the front part of the pelvis, and we're going to push it along the front. Just give me a moment. I'm trying to plan this out in my head. Okay, so what we're going to try and do is we're going to take our original vertexes here, pop these out just a little bit more forward. Like so. There we go. Like that. And I'm going to go to the polygon here and here and extrude these across. So grab these 2 polygons right there, this one right here on the sides. They should be facing more towards the middle. You can see in our front view, we will need to do some slight editing here. Like that. And we're going to extrude these polygons outwards. So extrude outwards. Now, once we extrude these polygons outwards, we need to do some small scaling, because these are where the 2 parts of the body are going to meet up. So we're going to push them, scale them on the x-axis like this. Push it slightly back. And I'm going to delete those 2 polygons that I have selected because they are intersecting. You don't want them there. You want them to be completely hollow so that when we merge all this together, it all becomes one object, completely. And then you just start doing your slight adjustments here to the pelvis region. I'm going to bring this down slightly. Bring that across. Grab these. Bring them down. make sure everything is flattened like this. And you can see we're getting our pelvis created now just by doing that slight amount of editing. And I'm going to start tweaking the front vertexes here, giving it more space so it flows a little better. And basically what you're trying to always worry about when you're building a character like this is the kind of flow that you're trying to build with it. So we're just taking our few first steps and making sure that the flow looks good. And right now I'm seeing a pretty decent flow. So as you continue modeling something like this, don't forget that the hip is kind of on a curve, right? So when we're building a model like this, we want the kind of curve of the actual hip to match up. So what we're going to do is, by looking at our front view, you can see we have this curve that's slightly going downwards here, right? So it's kind of curving here, and maybe we'll just curve it up a little bit and bring this part down like this. And what we're getting is this kind of like hip shape. So if I bring this around like that, you can change your smoothing group right now if you want to take a quick look at it. So I'm going to actually change my smoothing groups to make sure everything's a part of the same number 1 group. So I'm going to assign these. And you can see that right now we're starting to see the pelvis come up here. We have some dark shading and stuff, but don't worry about this too much. That's just the default lights in 3D Studio Max. If I toss on Mesh Smooth, we're starting to see the form of that kind of popping out, which is good. So we're going to continue this form building, and we're just going to keep extruding upwards. We're going to build out the rest of this character, the torso-wise. So I'm going to take this, and I'm going to extrude these polygons. Go up, there it is, extrude. And I'm going to start building out these actual hips here, going all the way up here, right there. And to do that, you just use your extrude tool, right? Like I said, it's a very common practice that you just keep using the extrude tool and then do your editing as you go. So as I'm doing this, making sure this is the next step here for the stomach area, getting the hip, I start modifying my front view as well. I do a little scaling to make sure everything kind of fits properly. Then I push these vertexes closer. And then I start going around my model just to make sure that everything looks okay. And you can see it's like really bent forward here. So what you need to do is do some slight editing here to create like basically the butt. So what we need to do is push this slightly forward and then push these slightly outwards. Slightly outwards here. Like that. And then we got to start working on the curves here in the back. Don't forget that Mesh Smooth will turn on. So changing these smoothing groups, putting this on, changing the smoothing group 1. And we can start modifying this, as we see fit. So I'm going to zoom in on these polygons here. Make sure that's all good. What you might end up wanting to do, and what I might do at this very moment, is I might do a slice plane down the inner part of the leg here. Because what that allowed me to do is give me an extra vertex to play around here. So I'm going to go to Edit, Swift Loop. Swift Loop, let's say here. And now you'll notice that while we Swift Loop that one, there's a lot of vertexes that are created on the other side of the leg, right? And we don't really need those vertexes here on this side. They're pretty close to one of the others. So what I'd recommend doing is actually starting to weld from underneath the foot here. It doesn't really matter if we have like a triangle or 2 in our mesh. Like I said before, triangle or 2 doesn't really affect our mesh too much. So what we can do is I can make this part a triangle down here, and I'm just going to grab these vertexes all across here. 2, 2, 2. Kind of lining these up. 1, 2, 1, 2. It's a little tedious and it takes time, but you get that extra detail in the one side of the mesh, and then you start welding it over, and it's gonna like really leave us that detail that we can work into to make it look really good. So I'm gonna grab these vertexes right here, like this. I'm going to go to my tools, weld tool, weld options. I'm going to increase the number just a little bit, enough so that they start welding together. And you can see I'm starting to get that weld maybe increase it just a little bit more like that. Maybe I'll deselect these ones since they're really, really close, like that. And then I'll apply and continue. Like that. We're not too focused on these top polygons here because as we keep building our model, we are going to get rid of those top. Well, they're not going to exist as we keep going. So you don't have to worry so much. Let's go step by step. There you go. Now there's just that tiny triangle down there, which isn't going to matter too much when building on our model. This is all welded. We can do our adjustments again to make sure this is in the proper place. Basically down the middle part of the leg to give it that nice curve shape that when we put the mesh smooth on, it looks really good. So I just make sure that my model is kind of pulling the shape. Like that. And then I focus on the inner part of the leg here that we have. Now we could probably weld all the way up to here as well. It's not going to affect it too much, but what we want to do is try and bring this down slightly. So it gives it more of a curve going to the back of the body as well. So we'll bring this slightly back. Like that. And now once we add the mesh smooth, it looks a lot better already in the back here. And then we can start bringing that up. Once we weld everything together too, it'll look a lot better down the middle. We do have some hidden polygons I see that are curving. So if you go here, you can see I actually have 2 hidden polygons. Always make sure that you clean up your model. Look, there's even another one right there. Always make sure you clean up the middle of your model. The easiest way to tell if there's polygons or not that exist, just pop one part of the leg away for a second, take a look, and bring it back. And you can see our mesh looks a lot better already by deleting those polygons. And by adding that little loop, we managed to put more detail and make things look a lot smoother on the inside of the legs down there. And it's just like taking your time, right? Like honestly, when it comes to this part of 3D modeling, it's a lot about taking your time. So when it comes to, like, if you're doing a different character than I am, or you're working on the same character, just take your time and make sure it matches up correctly, and you'll see the results. It's just a matter of like how much patience you have with it. And I know sometimes it's going to suck, especially when things don't work out and you're freaking out a bit. But really, just take your time, and you will see those results start forming up. And you can see right now I'm starting to actually push out the stomach here. That goes to the pelvis, push out the pelvis, that goes to the stomach. So I'm just kind of pushing these out slightly, and I'll even go to Alt X, my X-ray mode, and I see that like basically I have to push out the entire pelvis about there, and then to get to a nice center point here, pop this out here. You can do your adjustments however you see fit for your character. Of course, my character might, for you, might look a little bit different. Or you want to try something different with your model, that's great. This is all about experimentation, all about trying out and making mistakes and doing good. And then you can see with my mesh smooth, look at this is coming out a lot better. This is looking a lot smoother, a lot cleaner. And if you add that ambient occlusion light on there, you could probably see the nice lighting on it, or you can throw a light in your scene if you really want to. What I like to end up doing is normally I give it a material. So I actually push M on my keyboard, and we see our 2 references, and I assign my current model a material at this point. So I give it a material, and I'll assign this the actual skin color, because what I might end up doing, so I'll go to diffuse, so I create a material, I'll name this skin, I'll go to diffuse, and I'll actually give this a skin color. Now for my skin color, I might do something like, let me just go here, let me try this, 255, 209, 181. This is just a basic skin tone. And then I assign it to my mesh. Then I see like we get this. And then what you can do, if you want to see what it looks like slightly self-illuminated, you go to self-illumination category and you can put like 20. What that does is it makes the skin tone slightly brighter and uses less shadows and lighting inside 3D Studio Max, so that you can see kind of like what your textures and colors look like on your model a little bit better. So normally what I like to do is add a little bit of self-illumination to my models, so I can kind of see how everything's building up, and with a little bit of lighting not showing, a little bit of shadows not showing, we can build up our character. So I just put it on slight 20 right now, and I see with mesh smooth on, my model's actually pushing away from the reference a little bit. So I'm going to do my slight adjustments here. I'm going to pop these out a little bit more. Pop these out a little bit more. Downwards here. like that. And that's looking pretty good. That's looking pretty solid so far. So what we do is we continue those steps. We actually have to build up our stomach and get all the way up to here. So what we do is we just do the same thing we did before. We grab these polygons at the very top, and we have 6 polygons up here, and I'm just going to extrude them. Now don't forget that when you extrude, we get these weird polygons down the middle too. So just take your time and extrude it only like once or twice. Maybe I'll do it 3 times here, maybe 4 times. And I'm going to start building up my character. So I'm going to extrude once, and I'm just going to scale this down for a second like this. I'm going to go around, and I'm going to extrude again, so twice. Because we're getting pretty confident and we're working in an area that's pretty cylindrical, we can actually just jump in here and do it pretty quick. Because even though it's not obviously not matching up, we're about to make it match up in a second. So I'm going to make sure that all my vertices down the middle of my character are flat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my top view. I use my rectangle selection tool here, left click and drag to grab all the middle vertexes of my 3D model, and I use the scale tool on the X. I scale that all together, and that makes it nice and flat, and I can zoom in to see if it's all touching or intersecting, and I just make sure that all these lines are scaled and they're overlapping each other, which means that my models look like they're kind of one and the same. You can see it there, that it is. So my next step is actually going to Alt-X, and then I start actually changing these vertexes to match my shape a little better. So we do our same steps that we did before. I'm going to go around my model. I'm going to adjust it. I'm going to scale this in. So I'm going to use the scale tool here. And I'm going to push that in like that. And you can see on our side view here, we do have a lot of tweaking to do. So I will go in. So you'll notice that in our side view, it's becoming a little hard to work in. That's because the 2 models here are overlapping each other. So what I might do is just hide one of them. And you can see now it's a lot more transparent to work through. I can see a lot of hidden polygons here. And if I push Alt-X, you can see these. I'm going to delete these. Remember, we don't need the polygons that are intersecting there. And then I push Alt-X again. I go to my side view, and I start pushing in all my vertexes to where I see fit. And then remember that your vertex that's going up the side of the leg here should flow all across the model. So that means that my curve should look more like this. And like I said, you don't have to worry about these polygons at the top middle, like these ones right here, because we do keep extruding from these. They're not really meant for making the shape of our model, but doing some slight editing to them might help us, build out the actual shape of the character. So what you might need to do here is we start pushing in the butt a bit. So we create this nice curve to the back. If I do this, and then I bring these vertexes in. We're creating this like back curve. And so this will take a little bit of fine tweaking. But just take your time and work through it and just try and plan it out in your head. So I got this, see, just with some slight scaling right there. See, I'm just scaling. All I'm doing is scaling, adjusting, scaling. Moving, I'm making sure that we have our vertexes here. I go to Alt-X to make sure everything's kind of lined up. Making sure that the curve flows down the back of the body a bit. It might be a little too tapered here, so I just try and figure out what's going on in the front view. I take a look at it. I got some scaling to do here. Go back here. So really, it's just a lot of tweaking at this point because we're just extruding basically. The front part of the body is pretty much just like one big cylinder that we keep tweaking and adjusting. And since it's getting flatter around the stomach area, we have the flat stomach, and then we're building that out. We get this nice curve along the back that we're going to keep working on. So we're building this out. So I just need to grab these and go to my front view, and then I scale up my front view. Like that. Then we grab here. And I'm going to make sure all my vertexes down the middle are flat so that when I unhide my second model, unhide all, they all line up correctly down the middle. And I just scale them on the x-axis, and then I just line them up so that when I render, we get the nice stomach area. And I can go to polygon, grab all these, make sure they're all part of smoothing group 1 or whatever smoothing group you're using. And you can see we're actually starting to build out the stomach area, and we're going along, and we can keep building this out. We can test out our mesh smooth by just turning on this vial here. And you can see with mesh smooth on, this mesh is actually looking really good. You got the back, you got the butt, you got the stomach forming, and you can always add more detail later on. Remember, this is like mesh smooth with one iteration, right? So we can always add more iterations too to make it look a lot smoother as well. We'll see, look how like that looks so much smoother already. And we're only at 7,000 polygons. That's with mesh smooth at iterations 2. If you want a low poly game, iterations 1. That's it. Remember, the average character for a Pixar movie is over 500,000 polygons, almost 1,000,000 polygons. The average character in a video game right now is roughly about 50,000 to 100,000 polygons. So we got a lot of polygons we're able to play with still. We're just making the base mesh, and it's going along really well. So just keep it going. What we're going to do is we're going to extrude all the way up to the where the stomach meets the rib cage here. So we're going to make maybe a couple of final extrusions there that go up. And we're going to build that up. So let's build this up. Now, female models are a lot harder than male models. Male muscles are just slightly easier to do. I wouldn't say they're the easiest to do, but they are slightly easier to do. So when we're doing extrusions, you just basically need to make sure that we build it up as best as possible. So we're just going to extrude a couple times here. Go up here, extrude. I'm going to turn off mesh smooth right now as I extrude. So extrude here. And then we'll extrude twice more. Extrude. And extrude. And then, so now that we've extruded all those, remember to make sure to try and fit them in place. I do my rotations, I do my scaling. So I grab these vertexes here, all in the back. I'm going to rotate them to fit the back here. And then I'm going to adjust them to match a curve system. So like right now, basically what I'm doing is grabbing these to make sure they match the curve of the side. And then I want these vertexes to flow as they should on our model. So when I'm looking here, when I'm seeing the rib cage form, it's actually curving upwards like this, right, in our drawing. So that's the rib cage would have to start curving. So when I take my model here, I'm going to actually start forming this curve a little early on by flattening out these vertexes. And I'll flatten out these vertexes too. Flatten out these ones. Basically what I'm doing is I'm flattening the loops so that I can work with them a little bit easier. So that now that they're all flattened, and we can see like they're pretty flat here, excuse me, I can now start adjusting them to match this curve. So because this curve starts pretty early on, I'm actually going to tweak here, here, and I'm actually going to start flowing along the body. Like so. So I'm kind of making everything pop out as if it were, the ribs of the actual model. As a human being, your ribs they push outwards slightly, right? And then curve back into your body. So this is exactly what we're doing with this. We're just simulating that curve, that movement. And then I'm going to push Alt X. I'm going to zoom in here, see how it looks. And then we got to go to our front view and make sure it looks okay here. Remember that you should always hide the second part of your model. Make sure to delete the polygons on the inside here that aren't necessary. I see I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 from 3 extrusions, 6 polygons. That's fine. And now I'm going to push Alt X and make sure that I curve this model correctly. So I'm going to go in and make sure that my model looks good from all the views. I make sure that my vertex is coming up the side, almost right down the middle of the model here, so that I know there's like a good flow going on. And I make sure that this curve here is more towards the back, so I do my adjustments here. and I make sure that this is nice and flowing. This should be at the far, these two vertexes here should be at the furthest back. So I grab them, and I'll push them forward in a second. The computer's just taking a little bit while to load. So I'm just pop in there, and then I take these two here. Just make sure that these vertexes here are at the furthest back. We can taper them in a little bit later to create kind of the skeleton structure, but really they should be pretty close to being at the furthest of the back. And then I just do my slight editing and then curve around my model here. And that's looking pretty good so far. So now we need to edit the front part, because right now we're pushing a lot of the front of my model out, and we need to push this back. So I'm going to use a bit of my scale tool, pop this backwards. The vertex down the middle, I'll put that back in the middle, and then I'm going to start popping these a bit forward. So I'll pop them back a little bit, and then I move them forward to make that nice curve of the actual rib. So now you can see like this is kind of like our rib cage popping out just slightly. Like that. And we got a nice curve that comes out. And once we add our mesh smooth here, we go down here. You can see it forms that nice nice area. If we unhide all right there, you can see it's actually forming a nice body area right there. And this, for being really low poly, is working nice. This is less than 600 polygons, and we've already developed half a female character, right? So now that we have the pelvis done here, we're going to start focusing on adding a little bit more detail so we can get some nice shapes going on. And then we're going to focus on the upper torso area next, which is it gets a little bit complicated, a little bit tricky. But just make sure that your model's getting up to this point, and then we'll focus on the next point in the next video. So be sure to look at this part and the next part coming up. Thank you.